Hey guys, so it's been over a month since I last made a video, and to be honest, life got really hectic for a while. And probably by the time I publish this, I'll have made a community post or something about it. But I hope you forgive me. Um, but I basically thought that I would get back into the game of making games by doing a little Ludum Dare jam to just get myself going and get myself inspired to work on my main project again. So I thought I would make a little video talking about that process. Because I think game design process for game jams looks different for everyone, and it's kind of interesting to see what different people prioritize. So I thought I would show you what I prioritize and my order of operations for these things. I ended up making a card game called Card Vest because the theme was harvest and I'm terrible at puns. And it's a little card game about farming, basically. There's some simple kind of order of operations and strategicness to it, but it's nothing super fancy. And I kind of wanted it to feel somewhat relaxing and strategic at the same time. So the first step of the process for me was designing the gameplay. So I actually did this on a number of sticky notes. I basically drew out the cards, drew out the different ideas I had for different cards that could affect the cards, and I decided on three kinds of cards. So I had seed cards, which needed a certain amount, an individual amount for each card, of sunlight and water to grow. Um, and they would take a different amount of days to grow depending on the kind of seed as well. I also had weather cards that would give all of your plant cards a certain amount of water or sun, or take away a certain amount of water or sun. And on top of that, then I had resource cards, which you could apply individually onto a plant to add sun, take sun away, add water, take water away, that kind of thing. Or even in the case of like fertilizer, adding extra days of growth. And then the gameplay loop I decided would basically be how many days can you survive on this farm where you're trying to buy more seeds, grow more plants, make more money to buy more seeds, grow more plants, make more money. A silly little gameplay loop, really, but that also meant I had to implement a shop. So that was another thing I had in mind. So my next plan of action was not actually to get immediately into the code and start prototyping then and there. I think a lot of people at that point would be like, oh, I'm going to prototype now. But I personally prefer to get all of my programming ideas out on paper before I actually go ahead with them because I like to plan how everything will work together. So I essentially designed a lot of the code I was going to be making and the script on sticky notes. Obviously, nothing works fully when you make it on sticky notes. There's always going to be some aspect that doesn't work or something you didn't think of, but it tends to be little enough that you can iron it out then when you actually start to prototype that. So from then, the first thing I did, it was the next day by the time I'd done this. So I started this process at 8 p.m. on the first day of the jam. And then the next morning, I started actually programming. So I started setting up databases and variables and just anything that I would need to set up the gameplay. Probably the first hour of actually programming was just setting up databases and scripts and stuff so that everything else would be easier from there. Another part of setting up the databases was setting up how my CSV files would work. So I use CSV files for this to basically import loads of different cards. And I set up three different CSV files for each kind of card. And then later I also created CSV files for the shop system too. The next step in the process was actually setting up the gameplay. So a lot of this was setting up states, basically just state machines, where it would go between states and it would figure out what to do. I always had the idea of setting up in between states because I know that there might be a state in between where it has to calculate something once, and it's always handy to have that in between state. So for a couple of things, I set up in-between states, which I ended up needing in the end, so it was lucky I set that up. But at this point, of course, the project looked pretty much like a mess, and it looked disgraceful. I wasn't too angry at how the actual code looked, but obviously the visuals were very limited, and the problem is, when you're setting up loads of database and you have loads of information in there, and then you're trying to get everything visually represented, it can feel like you're getting nothing done until you suddenly get something done. So probably about halfway through setting up the actual gameplay states was when I started to think, oh, this is coming together. So once I'd added all of the gameplay states, which was multiple, I'm just going to put all the gameplay states up on the screen because I don't remember what they were. At that point, I started defining cards. So I went back to my little CSV files that I had made for my cards, which I'd made like 3 cards each in. I started bulking them out, making a larger number of cards so that it would actually play like a proper game. And once I had all of my cards defined, and sort of the numbers sort of balanced, kind of not balanced, because it's a game jam, and balancing is really hard for a game jam. So they kind of weren't balanced, but they're balanced enough ish. Um, Once it got to that point, I started to do the art for the background, first of all. And then after that, I did the art for the cards. So how I did the art for the cards was I basically did the base of the card, the type of the card on top of that, and then the actual individual item on top of that. So it's all drawn in layers. There's not actually one single like card in the game that's in the sprites or anything. It's all individual layers of different things that are just combined together. So it saved a lot of time doing it that way. And then after that, I moved on to my least favorite thing. Not my least favorite thing, but the thing I'm worst at, which is music and soundscapes. I thought at first I just thought I was going to make a little relaxing looped song and throw it in, and I thought, okay, this is doable for me because it's ambient. I think I can do ambient about by now. So, but then I had a few extra hours and I thought, oh, do you know what would be really cool if when you pressed the weather card, a soundscape for that weather type actually happened in the background. So I added that kind of last minute, but it was really worth it. Essentially, I had an FL Studio project where I had different things layered over each other and I messed with the EQ and stuff of each, but then I'd actually increase or decrease the mix of each track depending. So it saved a little bit of time. So I had like 3 different soundscapes, but it only took me like maybe half an hour to an hour to sort out all of the soundscapes. So it wasn't too bad. And then the next part, of course, everyone's favorite was debugging. Basically, I sat down for the last hour, probably a few hours before, about 3 hours before the project was due. And then I started debugging, just playing through the game, figuring out what bugs were there. Um, and then after that, I just put together the project on Itch and yeah, published it from there. Fun fact, after I published the project, about half an hour before the game jam actually ended, my fiance caught an extra bug where the day didn't actually count up. So that would have really sucked if people couldn't see how far they'd got. Oops. So I hope you found this process sort of interesting. The game Cardvest is available to play on HTML. It doesn't work on mobile too well because it doesn't actually adjust to the screen size, but it'll work on PC perfectly fine. So if you're interested in playing that, I will link that below. Thank you so much for watching my little video. I will have another out next week because I'm going to become a regular here again. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again.